I shall be brief. A brief survey of my military background. After being drafted in the United States Army, I was further drafted, so to speak, into the operation of the National Security Agency, which has responsibilities in the area of protecting security of classified communications. My duties in that area, which included a period of time of 2 extensions voluntarily of my active duty time in the military and 2 voluntary tours of duty in Vietnam, was in the area primarily of protection of the security of codes up to our top secret codes, and then the code systems, the cryptographic equipment with which these were operated on. Until 4 days prior to my release from active duty, honorably, after serving the 2nd tour of duty in Vietnam, I relinquished my top secret security clearance and was debriefed. This was in February 4th, 1969. Thereafter, I was an engineer at the Boeing Company and a designer and builder of nightclubs. I had no contact with radicals politically. I was a Democratic liberal. My first contact with the Federal Bureau of Investigation was April 18th, 1970, where largely by chance I was able to spot an individual named Chip Marshall, who was a federal fugitive, wanted in 2 counts of inciting to crossing interstate lines to incite to riot and inciting to riot, and causing destruction of government property in excess of $100. I was caused of his arrest. Of that, there was very, very good proof. There's police officer testimony at the time from the Seattle area. There's the testimony could be brought forward of the tavern manager and of one patron in the tavern itself. It has not been denied, however, so perhaps it's not relevant. On April 27th, 1970, after a series of discourses with Agent Lewis Harris of the Seattle office of the FBI, I became an undercover informant for the FBI in the Seattle area. I had 2 areas of responsibility. One, to exploit a contact I had with a member of the Seattle 8 defense, to infiltrate that defense, to attempt to penetrate it, and the other broad assignment was to penetrate bombing conspiracies. For that, for the first purpose, I was to become a political radical over a period of months. I did so, became more and more radical in my beliefs and opinions under the direction of Special Agent Lewis Harris. I began to advocate at his request violent solutions to political problems in order to gain credibility as first a political radical and then as a revolutionary. Finally, on September 27th, having succeeded by a series of actions, some of them criminal, some of them federal felonies, as a matter of fact, that I had committed, including inciting to riot on May 6, 1970, and other federal and local felonies of a nonviolent nature. I had gained sufficient credibility as a revolutionary or radical to penetrate directly into the defense offices of the Seattle 8. In a 2-week period, I was able to rifle defense files, take witness statements, review them, clandestinely and not so clandestinely overhear client-attorney communications regarding strategy and tactics of the defense. I was able to clandestinely overhear client-attorney conversations in the Longview bombing case and the Mayday 8 case. My reporting to Special Agent Bert Carter on October 12th has been acknowledged by U.S. Attorney Stan Pitkin, who on May 25th of this year acknowledged to the press that I had in fact been an undercover informant for the F.B.I., codenamed TJ, had dead letter drop secret code in the event that I was in danger, so forth, the other paraphernalia of espionage. It was with some difficulty that over a period of months that I was able to gain some credibility as a radical. I utilized techniques in my defense of quickly making suggestions of a great variety of helpful types, some of them legal, some of them illegal, and working for Lewis Harris, I attempted to involve members of the Seattle 8 defense in criminal acts, including obstruction of justice, etc. In the months of October, November 1970, I was involved in finding individuals who would be willing or who could be talked into committing a bombing. This is at the request of Special Agent Bert Carter. Over a period of 2 months, approximately, with a police officer in the Seattle area who has confirmed this to attorneys, to John Kipner of the New York Times, Paul Jacob of National Education Television. A police officer acted as an intermediary between Special Agent Bert Carter and myself throughout the series of discussions. My purpose was protection of myself in the event something went wrong. I did not intend to be left out in the cold in a bombing. On April 2nd this year, I executed the first affidavit and began the first act of surfacing. This is after I'd quit on approximately the 5th day of December last year, after Bert Carter had sent instructions that the individual who was actually to place the bomb in this conspiracy, that individual was to be killed in a booby-trapped explosion. I could not go along with felony murder. On April 2nd, after a great deal of reflection of my personal future and the reasons that I felt that people had a reasonable reason to know, I executed an affidavit in the offices of Jeffrey Steinborn, a Seattle attorney in the May Day 8 case. Immediately that afternoon, he had a conference with U.S. Attorney Stan Pitkin, as a result of which it was agreed that I would keep quiet, that I would not make the affidavit public, that Steinborn would do the same, and the U.S. Attorney would do the same. On April 8, 1971, Federal District Judge William H. Goodwin dismissed at the request of the government 12 federal felony indictments for destruction of government property and in conspiracy to incite that, whatever the technical charge is, against 8 individuals known as the May Day 8, who had been indicted for destruction of the Air Force ROTC annex at the University of Washington campus May 1st, 1970. At that point, I began, with that basis, to make an attempt to bring into court my allegations so that they could be proven or disproven in federal court of law. That has been resisted by a variety of means by the federal government and its representatives. On November 2nd, there has been scheduled in district court in Tacoma, Washington, an evidentiary hearing, in the Longview bombing case, in which I have confessed, and I intend to under oath, confessed conspiracy to obstruct justice at the behest of F.B.I. special agents. In the case of Longview bombing, defendant James Elwin Green and others, 4 of the 5 indicted defendants in that case have previously pleaded guilty.
Will you conclude by telling us very briefly about Jeff Desmond's case that I think you're familiar with?
I know that I am something of a Kafkaesque presence in this assemblage of scholars. But my case is not isolated. On the 10th of July this year, I convinced Jeff Desmond to come forward and discuss Hicks' activities as an undercover informant for the FBI. On July 12th this year, in the presence of defense counsel, Jeff Desmond, executed an affidavit confessing to 2 unsolved bombings in the Seattle area.
Was he an FBI agent then?
He was not an FBI informant. His activity had previously ceased. It had ceased because of the fact that in one of those bombings he was caught in the act, March 3rd, 1970, at the U.S. Post Office in Seattle, Washington. Jeff Desmond, along with 3 co-conspirators who he had, by his own admission, lured to the site with him for that act, was arrested by Seattle police officers. Within 2 hours that night, Jeff Desmond was released on personal recognizance. The other individuals held on $25,000 bond. All charges were dropped very quietly, very quickly against Jeff Desmond. He never acted as a state's witness. He never acted as a witness of any sort for the government in that case. And yet all charges were very quietly dropped. He has confessed to another completely unsolved bombing, February 20th at the University of Washington. I have approached local law enforcement agencies of every variety in the Seattle area with the exact particulars of the explosive manufacturer, names, etc., exactly how the bomb was built. One of the 2 bombs that he set at the University of Washington, by the way, was unexploded, and so it was there as physical evidence. He has been able to perfectly describe it. There have been no actions taken.